One day, she accidentally found herself transported into one of her favorite novels, where the story tells of a villain named Gerald. She was transported to another dimension. She barely managed to finish reading the book. It's scary here, and she wants to go home. Now I had to become the tutor of the precious son of an imperial nobleman, and his name is Damaris. There was a feeling of satisfaction, her sweet little angel. She would be with him all his life and would never leave him. And it really was great to abstract from the bustle of everyday life, to be a parasite and idle, to teach the child of a rich man and enjoy luxury. But she never expected to become tied to the system of the future antagonist. Does this mean that she will have to help a fictional person? And for the sake of one's own tragic fate, in order to avoid a bad ending, one will have to prevail and become brave. The first plan to increase luck is to win the trust and affection of his child, thereby achieving a successful ending. He should have said what she taught him and told his dad that he wanted them to be together. The system sent out a warning that the success rate was less than 5%, and Gerald asked if this woman was brainwashing him again. Plan number 2. Avoid any unwanted confrontations and use wisdom. As long as she protected Damaris, everything would work out. But the system gave another disappointing warning, and the man asked who gave her the right to expose herself to such a useless risk. The third plan to improve the system's luck is to become the Duke's wife and protect the future with love. The girl looked for the Lord, but he only covered her with a cloak because she came to his room dressed like that. The Grand Duke then asked if he could believe that she had ulterior motives. "Stop, stop, stop, we've taken a wrong turn." It's just incredible. She was working on her plan to get out of here, but there was no way. Once she got into the mansion, the Duke warned, she would have the right to storm only him. "Wolf, don't come closer." Flames engulfed the building, and the man pointed a gun at the frightened girl. Gerald ordered her to answer and asked what she had just seen. Did she really move here for another death, she thought as she stepped back. Gerald warned her to remember that she only had one chance to get the answer right. The whole commotion started with a novella she loved. Her name is Annie. She is a first-year university student and loves to read books. Now she has become very fond of a famous story called The Death of the Evil Duke Gerald. The antagonist's name is Gerald Stewart. He is the tyrant king of the empire whom the protagonist sought to overthrow. Practicing forbidden magic, the ruler cruelly punishes anyone who gets in his way. Because citizens are constantly in fear for their lives, looking at him, Annie felt incredible sadness inside. The plot did not worsen in the past. Gerald immediately became a ruthless tyrant. Marriage was mentioned in passing, but when the union fell apart, his close associates forced him to marry Princess Alana. Immediately after the wedding, Alana learned Gerald's secret. His precious son possesses a power that is considered a curse in their world. Witchcraft was punishable, witches were burned, and so the princess mercilessly killed Damaris. Enraged by the loss of his son, Gerald executed the princess and declared war on this stupid world. If he hadn't lost the one he loved, things would have ended differently, Annie asked. If only someone had been on his side. If only she could, after all this series of tragedies. But it's impossible. She just needs to return this book. However, when she reached the library floor, the girl smelled a strange and pungent odor. Balls of fire were bursting out of the doors. The girl wondered anxiously if there was anyone inside. Inside, she met the boy and shouted at him not to be afraid. She would get him out of here. It was so strange why the apartment suddenly caught fire, and this child. "The chandelier is falling! Watch out!" Annie screamed, pushing the boy further away. Is this really how she will die? And suddenly a voice rang out. The game to save the tyrant was activated. Well done, player. In the game The Death of the Evil Duke Gerald, its character became Brianna. Her mission was to change Duke Gerald's fate in 90 days, with a 15% chance of success. What? Did she ask for this? She must change the tyrant's fate in exchange for his return. No, she didn't want to. Reading about him is one thing, but meeting him face to face? No thank you. And what is happening now? Annie was transported and found herself standing in a building engulfed in flames, but all she could see in front of her was a strange diagram and the tip of a sword. The man said she saw things she shouldn't have seen. Only the dead can keep secrets. What the hell? Annie thought fearfully. Being in the body of Brianna Jones, this name was heard only once in the novel. Brianna Jones came to the Stewart estate to apply for a teaching position, and she witnessed Damaris lose control of his magic. In a panic, the girl lost consciousness, and when the teacher was about to die in the fire, her body accepted another soul. and Annie suddenly moved into her body at the very last moment, but now the trouble was different. What this shows is that Gerald thinks she has found out Damaris's secret, so he is planning to kill her. And this was not some kind of joke. This was Brianna's fate, to die either by fire or at the hands of a villain. However, Annie had no intention of giving up her life and, exclaiming, turned to his lordship. Shouting, she asked if he really wanted to kill an innocent man. The Duke replied that she had broken into the estate to harm the child, and the interest was rapidly decreasing. He said she deserved to die. Oh shit, Annie thought. She needed to buy herself time. You are mistaken, the girl said. She was trying to protect the little gentleman, not harm him. She came here to interview for a teaching position, but then she saw a little gentleman surrounded by flames. If she didn't do anything, why did Damaris suddenly flare up? Gerald asked incredulously. The success rate was rapidly declining, and she begged his lordship to trust her. The boy was freezing and looked sick. The percentage dropped to 10. Gerald was worried when a warning came in that the rate had dropped below 10%. What is she doing? It has already dropped to 8%. Is she really going to die? That's enough, said the Duke. Wait, the girl screamed hysterically. Brianna knew how to cure the little gentleman. These words and knowledge were the last hope. The man was suspicious of her and lifted the girl's chin, who was trembling with fear. And he said he didn't know what game she was trying to play, but he would only give her one chance. A system alert warned her to know that death in this world meant death in the real world. The Duke gave her a chance, and Annie took advantage of it, using the knowledge from the book to lull the baby to sleep with a song. In the novel, every time Damaris lost control of his magic, Nanny would sing him this song. The girl didn't know if she was singing correctly, but the words were the same, so she hoped it would work. It was the first time Gerald had seen Damaris calm down so quickly her method had really worked. Even though she tried to find an excuse to resolve the situation, he didn't see any fear or hostility towards Damaris's magic in her. But even if that was the case, he must not take his eyes off her. He muttered out loud. It was a pleasant sound. Great, Annie thought. Her success level had increased. Damaris is fine too. That's wonderful, she thought, stroking the boy's head. Miss Brianna, the Duke suddenly addressed her in a cold and frightening tone. Without showing it, she looked at the man and asked, Yes, Your Highness. The man congratulated her. She was hired. From now on, she would be Damaris's private tutor. Piercing her back with a cold gaze, Gerald thought, it doesn't matter what happens. There are no problems that he cannot handle. That's what he decided for himself, remaining wary of the girl, and Annie thought fearfully about why the level of success had dropped again. Several days have already passed since Annie entered the book's story. Life here turned out to be much calmer than she could have expected, and nothing else had happened to Damaris yet. And every day, besides studying with him, she doesn't really do anything other than teach tons of lessons. Thankfully, Gerald didn't come back anymore, and she was certainly glad not to have to deal with the story's main villain. However, her success rate has dropped to as low as 9%, and if it doesn't appear, how can she raise the bar? Oh, how she missed the hot pots, noodles, and dumplings of reality. The boy looked at his teacher, and he was in some doubt, but still decided to contact her. Ms. Brianna, the boy called the teacher, and Annie asked if he didn't understand something. The boy modestly and sadly asked if she was leaving soon. The teacher gasped and asked in surprise why he thought so. Damaris explained that all the teachers he usually worked with ended up leaving. And indeed, she thought, remembering the plot, those around this world despise magic. If anyone is caught practicing witchcraft, even a child, they will have a hard time. And even the Duke's son is no exception. Plus, for his age, the boy still has a poor command of spells, which is why they often break out on their own. To protect his child, the father periodically replaces the governesses. So Annie wasn't surprised why this little one was so worried. No, said Brianna. She promised that she would be with the young master until the end, as long as he himself is not against her company. This really shocked the little boy. None of the teachers had promised to be with him yet. Embarrassed, he awkwardly lowered his gaze and the next moment exclaimed, "Good." The teacher and student quickly got along, but this idyll was interrupted by the creak of the front door. The Duke entered the room abruptly, interrupting the casual conversation. Annie stood up abruptly, continuing to teach the lesson, or at least pretending to explain something. They glanced awkwardly at the Duke, trying not to burn what they were not studying. The man looked at them menacingly and intently, which sent shivers down their spines. Brianna winced and tried to explain something, but she couldn't get the words out. For some reason, it felt like she had been caught reading a novel during a lecture. "That's enough for today," Gerald suddenly said, interrupting the lesson. Looking, Brianna turned out to be an excellent teacher. The girl awkwardly replied that it was all thanks to his son's hard work. Annie was nervous. It was somehow scary when he looked. Did she really do something wrong again? The man began, when suddenly the girl exclaimed apologetically. The girl swore that she would never repeat the reckless mistakes again, thinking that she couldn't let the scale fall below the baseboard. Clearing his throat, he said that passers-by, seeing her rags, would definitely think that the ducal mansion was underpaying its governesses. Indeed, looking at herself, the girl saw stains and holes left after the fire on the first day. "He told her to hurry up and dress up more beautifully, you see," answered Annie. "She doesn't have any other dress except this one." Then the Duke told her to buy clothes at the local shop, but, the girl said. With his money, the man reassured the teacher. Feeling free to choose, Brianna thanked her master. Suddenly, pulling at the sleeve of her dress, Miss Damaris called out. The boy awkwardly reminded her that yesterday she had promised to play with him after reading. The delight at the sight of this child was simply off the charts, hitting straight into the heart. "Then," she suggested enthusiastically, "let us go right now, young master." But then Brianna shuddered. Wait, she thought, dumbfounded. What did he just blurt out? She completely lost her mind, asking to take Damaris for a walk right in front of Gerald. Was it too late to go back on her word, she wondered, and said she thought the new outfit could wait. Seriously, Damaris asked. He and Brianna would have fun. Annie wouldn't have the heart to turn him down. And so, plucking up her courage, she timidly asked his lordship what he thought of this proposal. The Duke looked at her with displeasure, covering her with darkness. This is pure horror, she thought, placing her hand on her heart as an expectant atmosphere filled the room. And from the Duke's face, two pleading and sweet little faces looked at him, despite his menacing appearance. Okay. Scratching behind his ear, Gerald agreed to the persuasion. The children exclaimed joyfully when they received permission to go for a walk and play together. But in that case, the Duke continued, the success rate suddenly increased by 1%. In exchange for the agreement, the man set the condition that the three of them would go together. So they arrived at the main square of the duchy. Annie looked around. It was noisy. It was her first time leaving the mansion after being transported to the novel. She didn't even know why, but her success suddenly went up by 1. There was a thrilling feeling inside, as if she was moving in the right direction. Suddenly the girl noticed that the gaze of passers-by was directed at her sideways, and she felt uncomfortable. They seemed to be talking about Gerald. She couldn't make out what they were saying, but she was sure they were. The Duke of Stuart followed the governess out of the carriage, and Annie looked back at him. According to the description in the book itself, the Duke's gaze from the throne is always directed towards the submissive peasants of the city. His cold eyes, sparkling like a wolf's, easily instill fear in crowds of people. Brianna wasn't surprised why the locals were so scared. It was time for them to go, he said, turning to Lady Brianna, and with a gasp the girl agreed. So she followed the Duke and his son, continuing to hear the barbed expressions behind her back. At the local boutique, a pleasant woman greeted the guests of honor. The hostess presented them with new outfits from the seasonal collection, asking them not to hesitate to look at them. Here, she showed, for example, one sewn by the best seamstress in the kingdom, the ideal choice for a young lady. But the girl from the modern world is not accustomed to such elegant things, thinking that he is too pretentious. Next, the woman showed a dress into which precious stones from a neighboring principality were sewn. They would highlight the beauty of her eyes. There were so many offers that my eyes ran wild, and they continued to show me dresses. What a dizzying fashion show, Annie thought, confused. But then the Duke thought for a moment and said that they would take everything, and the girl almost had a heart attack. And suddenly the little neighbor said enthusiastically that they were taking them too. He asked the girls to take the shopping to the Duke's mansion today. "Stop!" Brianna cried, jumping up and asking the Duke to hold the horses for at least a minute. The success rate dropped by 1 in that same second. What a pathetic system this is. Even such a phrase is a step backwards, so there's nothing to say against it. The girl thanked his lordship for his generosity, but they were too expensive for her position. And in such clothes, it would not be particularly appropriate for her to teach the young master. Do you agree? She asked. The father and son imagined what it would look like. The man was puzzled by this, and he seriously thought about the governess's words. The Duke said that he understood everything and asked her to take whatever she liked. Annie thanked him. Thank God they got away with it. They finally chose an outfit and left the store. Annie was exhausted. I didn't think that going clothes shopping could affect my success rate. I should be more careful and attentive, but the walk turned out to be good. Suddenly, she noticed a bookstall and thought that perhaps she should visit it and buy some books related to this world. The governess turned to the gentleman and asked if he would allow her to buy some textbooks. She pointed out that they were sold nearby. Sighing, the man agreed, but suddenly His Highness was called out from the side. That man was Addis Chalamet, Gerald's most trusted officer. The man came closer and reported something to the Duke. Gerald replied, "Clear." He told them to go to the store first. The guard would be standing outside. He would be back soon, they agreed. After seeing the men off, the governess suggested that the boy look into the bookstore. Suddenly, a voice came from the direction of the store, calling a name familiar to Annie Ethan. According to the text of the novel, the young man's snow-white cloak fluttered in the gusts of wind. And on this man's ear hung an earring decorated with a magic stone. Running closer, he apologized to Sophia for being late, but the girl still met him. They were the main protagonists of the story of the death of the evil Duke Gerald, Ethan Joria, and Sophia Adler. What a coincidence, Annie thought. So this bookstore belongs to him. He is an incredibly powerful mage who opened his shop to provide shelter to fugitive wizards. Brianna walked into the bookstore and watched the pair of heroes from the sidelines. However, Annie did not expect to meet the story's protagonists so soon. Looking at them, you could immediately see the hero and heroine. They look very beautiful. It was a pity that she was far away and couldn't hear what they were chatting about. If Damaris hadn't been there, she might have gotten to know him. She checked and the boy was sitting quietly in the empty spot. It was amazing how he remained obedient, even without his father's words, like an angel, when suddenly Annie heard a completely different conversation. The conversation was about the fact that the Stewart's people had come out here for a walk, and also about the fact that evil spirits were found on the Stewart's estate. "Seriously," his friend asked. "Why would he lie?" asked another. "It can't be a monster." His neighbor's wife was delivering vegetables to the Duke's mansion and heard it with her own ears, saying it was locked in the basement. From where the fierce scream was often heard, the friend tried to find an explanation, but the other said that there was no other explanation here. "If it is not true, why are there such rumors about them? I heard that the head of the family is easily capable of fighting 100 enemies at once." The Stewart family still holds on to their position as protectors of the kingdom. They probably made a deal with a demon or something worse. It turns out that they have a similar opinion about everyone who has a close or direct relationship with Gerald. People believe that he keeps the monster as a pet and despise anyone associated with it. He makes no attempt to refute the gossip, allowing his own honor to be dragged through the mud, only to cover up Damaris's outbursts of magic. Willingness to sacrifice the honor of an entire family just to protect a son. Even though he may seem indifferent at times, he loves his child with all his heart. By the way, his wife died immediately after the birth of the child. Apparently, he got rid of her. "Ugh, what nasty words," said his friend, unable to bear it. Annie indignantly called out to them. When suddenly the book behind her fell to the floor, the girl turned to the child with concern. Damaris was consumed by anger, reflected in a magical surge. The wind developed around him, and black magic swirled around him. Fortunately, they were standing behind the bookshelves, and no one saw the young gentleman's outburst. Damn, Brianna thought. She'd forgotten she'd left Damaris alone in the reading corner. He couldn't be allowed to lose control of his magic. Please, not in public. "Sir?" She rushed to the boy and asked if he could help her find an interesting book. She suggested that he simply leave here, but the magical emission was already bursting at the seams due to the boy's anger. Looking around, the girl anxiously thought that she needed to get the boy out as quickly as possible. There were too many prying eyes here. Damn, Brianna thought, there was nowhere to hide. Wait, she suddenly froze. According to the novel, Ethan keeps a portal to the magic laboratory in his shop just in case. It seemed like it was somewhere here. Come on. She urged herself faster, continuing to press on the books. The men still didn't finish. If the Duke made a deal with the devil, his son is probably a monster too. Shut your mouths, Annie thought irritably. Stop slandering. By the way, no one has ever seen Stewart's offspring in person. Are the rumors really true? They asked Monster. The boy's voice rang out. You are all lying, you disgusting liars, he screamed, and his magic went out of control. Books flew off the nearest shelves. No, the governess, Damaris, screamed. It was impossible to let them notice him. The girl winced, holding back his magic and wondering where exactly the teleportation item was. She had to hurry, and fortunately Annie's gaze finally found her. The reading corner was immediately empty, leaving behind clouds of smoke and scattered shelves of books. Sophia asked Ethan with concern, did he feel it too? The surge of magic was so strong, it must have belonged to her, Ethan thought. The men heard the child's voice. He seemed to be standing between the shelves with the girl, but where did they go? Oh no, the magicians thought anxiously, looking at each other. They ran up to the book in which the teleport spell was hidden and were convinced of everything. At this time, a magical portal transported the girl and the boy to the laboratory. There they are, Annie thought. In the novel, Ethan disguised the entrance to his hideout as a book, and by correctly pressing the letter on the spine of the binding, the gates will open, and that's how they managed to escape from the bookstore without letting ordinary people see the magic. Thank God they managed to escape in time. Damaris lost consciousness due to the release of energy. I'm sorry, Annie apologized mentally and guiltily for not being able to properly stand up for him. Suddenly, the girl heard the sound of footsteps behind her and turned around sharply. He's already arrived, she thought, looking at the man, Ethan, hiding his face behind a mask. She shuddered, suddenly realizing that the entrance here was kept secret from the others. The girl was worried about what to answer if he asked about this. She swallowed her saliva, trembling with anxiety. As if to get out of this, Ethan asked to listen. Suddenly, unexpectedly, he asked her to tell him how she had managed to control such a huge flow of mana. She is apparently a powerful sorceress. He asked her to share her secrets. Everything is not so, Annie answered. I mean, she thought warily about what was wrong with him. But then Damaris's condition indicated where to prioritize. His condition worsened. What happened to the boy? The wizard asked the girl, stunned. Stop, the girl thought. Ethan is one of the most powerful sorcerers in the city. He will definitely be able to help. And so Brianna immediately asked to save him, begging. The protagonist asked in surprise, wondering why the sorceress couldn't help him herself. Please, Brianna begged, squeezing his hand in hers. The man, embarrassed, cleared his throat and nevertheless agreed to help the lady. He actually started treating Damaris. Annie breathed a sigh of relief when the man agreed to help. But then the magician became wary, pouring his mana into the boy radiating magic. Quite expected from a protagonist, Annie thought, whom the novel described as valiant and kind. Finally, having finished the treatment, he returned the boy to the governess. Brianna breathed a sigh of relief and thanked the magician with a happy smile. By the way, Ethan said as he got up, her little friend collapsed due to the exhaustion of his magic. So, the magician asked sadly, does she belong to him? Annie answered excitedly. Why is he suddenly asking? She thought. But in Ethan's imagination, everything turned out to be simply different. Ethan admitted that he thought differently, and Annie apologized for her unjustified hopes. But then I thought, why the hell is she asking for forgiveness, however? The magician said. The hero's tone changed and the girl tensed, anticipating what might await her. Angrily, Ethan asked how she got in here since she couldn't do magic. Damn it, Annie thought, confused, still unable to come up with an excuse. He continued asking questions, and the girl was frightened and wondering what words to choose. If she didn't use strong magic to remove the spell, then she simply knew where the gate was. The girl mumbled in response. The magician ordered her to speak frankly. I wish I could, Brianna thought warily, but they certainly wouldn't believe her when she read everything in a book. That he is in fact a character in a fictional story, where his sworn enemy is Gerald. Well no, then he would definitely consider her crazy and kill her, the girl realized. Annie was still shaking, trying to formulate anything coherent. Then she asked if it would sound credible if she said she had found the passage by accident. Ethan told the lady that lying to the magician was a huge mistake. Well, she started to say so, but stopped. No, there was no point in dodging him, especially after his help to Damaris, Annie thought. Ethan thought she couldn't even think of a way to get out of it. She was still trying to find an excuse for herself. Is he really protecting the boy? The man wanted to end the interrogation, understanding the situation, but then a scream rang out throughout the room. Turn every corner upside down immediately, he ordered. Ethan asked what was going on upstairs. Suddenly, Annie received a warning notification that the percentage was rapidly decreasing. Goosebumps ran across her skin. Damn, she thought. Gerald must already know about the disappearance. Sir, she said hastily, the Duke has probably arrived. She needs to give him the baby. This is his son, Ethan asked with a sigh. The girl was afraid to answer, because revealing Damaris's identity would only bring more problems. There was no time to think. It was necessary to win his favor immediately. And so the girl confidently said it was true. The novel's protagonist was extremely stunned by such honesty and sincerity. He fell silent, and so the girl addressed him twice before he reacted. But then Ethan, instead of answering, simply waved his hand. And suddenly, an unexpectedly warm feeling spread throughout the whole body. What is he doing? The girl thought, looking with admiration at the magic before her eyes. Having finished with what he had planned, Ethan said seriously, "This time she can step. However, now there is a mark on her, she will try to tell someone about his shelter, and something irreparable will happen." Indeed, Annie was surprised, and Ethan thought, is it normal or too much? Why did she suddenly become quiet? Did he really scare her? Annie wondered if Ethan seemed more nervous than she did. Worried that he might have frightened her, the man decided to justify himself, explaining how things really were. "Are you threatening?" Brianna asked, grinning, and interrupting Ethan winced in embarrassment. The man cleared his throat and asked that his words be taken seriously. He issued a warning. The girl laughed in Brianna's eyes. He wasn't the least bit scary. "What's so funny?" the magician asked, taken aback and confused. She said she understood and vowed to take this secret with her to the grave. Even if he hadn't cast the spell, she wouldn't have told anyway, but he was very bad at playing the villain. As for the method of her teleportation here, Emma promised to share it a little later. Ethan agreed and asked to be allowed to accompany her back, and he began to cast a spell, and the two bodies were enveloped in warm vibrations of magic. At this time, the knights upstairs had captured all the people present in the library. Gerald's percentage scale dropped to 6, and he ordered everyone present in the shop to be interrogated. "Don't lag behind and don't let anyone go until they answer where Damaris went." But suddenly the man condemning the Duke behind his back suddenly cried out in fear. He saw. The man looked at him irritably, indicating with his eyes that he should speak. "Your Grace," he said in a trembling voice, "a lady with a child came here." He thought that she had kidnapped him. That was true, his friend agreed. They had nothing to do with it. "They're about Brianna," Gerald thought. His patience running out, the percentage dropped to 5. The Duke ordered his closest knight, Addis, to send guards to find her, and he reported, and he wanted to personally ask 2 witnesses a couple of questions in the mansion. "As you command," answered Addis. The man pleaded, begging his lordship to have mercy, but the Duke was adamant, especially when it came to his son. "Wait, sir!" Brianna suddenly exclaimed, quickly explaining that the young lord was unwell. Therefore, she decided to take him away to rest. Looking at his son, the Duke saw that he was breathing heavily. "True?" he asked the governess with distrust, already guessing what had happened. "Hold on," Brianna told herself. She had to explain the reason why she did this. Meanwhile, the success rate dropped to 4. Otherwise, she worried, he would definitely turn her into dust with his rage, and answered, "Yes." Brianna wanted to find a remote place where he could lie down, because one thing happened as before. "Seriously?" asked the Duke. Brianna nodded affirmatively. It was impossible to speak directly about the mana surge. But he also had to hide it, so she simply hinted that they would explain themselves at the estate. But he remained silent, which made Annie nervous. Suddenly, Gerald ordered the knights to take everyone. They are heading back. The percentage increased by 1. The whips struck the people's backs. Their wheezing and groans could be heard. But the Duke only watched. The man present in the library was being tortured and beaten at the time of the mana surge. And not only him, many people were awarded this fate, but there was also one with whom the Duke wanted to deal personally. He walked up to Ethan, who was practically crucified on the cross, and grabbed him by the collar. The cold glint in his eyes was imprinted in my memory when Gerald said that only the dead could keep secrets. Immediately after seeing this, Annie jumped up in fright, waking up from a nightmare. Her breathing was ragged and her body was covered in sweat and trembling from fear. This was just a nightmare, she thought fearfully. The girl hoped that everyone present was okay. Yesterday, after returning back to the Stewart estate, Gerald handed Damaris over to the doctor's care. Brianna thought he was going to give her a dressing down, but in the end, he sent her back without saying a word. She thought she was too nervous because she didn't even remember falling asleep. What a terrible dream. After the hint, he immediately realized that his son lost consciousness due to a strong release of mana. However, she was initially aware of the boy's secret, so how could she explain the situation to him? Suddenly there was a knock at the door and Brianna asked who was there. "Are you awake yet?" the butler asked Lady Brianna, continuing to knock. "Wait," she replied, not wanting to keep the man waiting. "She'll open it now." Oh, before approaching the door, I thought, why did the butler suddenly decide to look in, really? The butler informed the girl that the gentleman wanted to see her, so he asked her to go to him immediately. Apparently, there was simply no other choice left. There was a knock on the door of the room. Gerald stopped writing and allowed entry. Taking a break from his work, Gerald looked in surprise at the figure who entered. As the girl approached closer, the trembling in her body became more visible. "Were you waiting?" she asked the gentleman anxiously. Gerald looked tired, as if he had been interrogating people all night. And now it's the turn of the main witness. After finishing his report, he said that he had talked with the regulars of the bookstore. Now everyone swore to keep quiet and not spread gossip, he said with the same expression on his face as before. Frightened by his words, similar to the words from the dream, she thought, wait, it turns out it was in her imagination. Worried about the people, Brianna shouted and asked what he had done to them. The Duke, who had spent half the night working on the documentation, was shocked by the sudden change in mood. But then his close knight, having cleared his throat, hastened to explain they simply sent them home. Seriously, she asked, stunned. Yes, Addis answered, the citizens are in perfect order. But what about torture? The girl muttered fearfully. Unexpectedly for everyone, it sounded loud. Addis replied with a smile. Apparently, they simply misunderstood those words. Gerald re-entered the conversation and addressed Mistress Brianna in a serious tone. Annie noticed that the success rate was currently stuck at 5% and responded nervously. Did she want to tell him everything? Gerald asked calmly, and Brianna trembled. There was no point in looking for an excuse after all. The system warned that if the scale dropped to 0, the mission would fail. She had to be careful with her words. She took a deep breath before answering. That's right, she confirmed confidently. She knows about the young master's magical gift. The man bit the inside of his lip, waiting for an explanation of the source of knowledge and her relationship to knowledge. Brianna explained that she knew his son was having a very hard time because of the instability of his magic, and also that the Duke carefully hides this so that the baby is not treated as an outcast. Even though Damaris is forced to constantly be on the sidelines, it is not his fault. In Brianna's opinion, witchcraft is not a crime at all, the girl said, and if he allows it, she would very much like to continue teaching his son in the future. Having expressed her thoughts and attitudes about magic, Brianna looked at Gerald. The thought flashed through my head that such a person probably needs love and protection. However, after listening to the governess, the Duke remained silent, thinking. Why is he silent? Brianna thought anxiously. Did she blurt out something unnecessary? Go ahead, Gerald said, letting the girl go. What? The governess asked in surprise. The girl did not expect that she would stand up for herself and not even receive a single reproach in response. Gerald raised his eyebrows and asked if she wanted to talk about anything else. No, Annie answered quickly. And so, before the gentleman changed his mind, she hurried to get away from here. But suddenly, a couple of steps away, Gerald caught up with her and, asking her to wait, covered her with his cloak. The man asked her not to forget about ethics, after all. It was not appropriate for a lady to walk around the mansion in a nightgown. Annie was so worried that she even forgot to change her clothes and came to the office at the first call of the butler. It was rather strange, she thought as she left. It seemed as if the Duke's icy heart had thawed a little. In fact, he is really not as rude and cruel as described in the novel. After seeing the girl out, the Duke remained propping up the door, lost in thought. She really doesn't think magic is bad. Gerald wondered if that was true. The success rate had jumped by 7 points. The next morning, all three gathered at the same table, and it seemed like a wonderful meal for father and son was in the offing. But how did she become a part of it then? Brianna wondered nervously. The maid's scream still rang in my ears, waking up Mistress Brianna and saying that His Grace was inviting me to dine with her. The good news was that after their conversation in the office, the success scale shot up quite a bit. Well done, Annie thought with a sigh of relief. Okay, it doesn't matter. Now food was in first place, she suddenly switched to something pleasant. But why are there so many kitchen utensils on the table? The ribeye was wonderful to look at, but it needed 6 utensils. The Duke, who was dining, noticed the girl's disorganized behavior and felt insecure. Brianna's eyes were running wild, wondering what to take, this device or another one. She looked confused. Watching this, the Duke frowned, but then there was a knock on the door, distracting him from his meal. The gentleman was called and he asked the knight to come in. Addis apologized for disturbing them, but they had been sent a document from the imperial court. He said His Majesty wanted him to take charge of the preparations for the harvest festival. It was there that the tragedy unfolded. The emperor holds a festival every 3 years to give thanks to the gods. For mercy and protection, everything went smoothly in the novel until the bull broke loose and ran straight into the crowd. Then, during the chaos, Gerald will save the crown princess. And following the plot of the novel, she will fall head over heels in love with Duke Stuart. And a few months later, the current ruler uses his own family as a lever of pressure. He will force them to marry and, unable to object, he will have to agree. And later, the heir to the throne will become the main villain of this story. The knife fell from her hands. Gerald asked what had happened, and Brianna asked him to forgive her clumsiness. "She's also participating," the Duke asked. "What?" Annie thought. Why on earth was he asking? The Emperor mentioned that he should bring Damaris. The boy had just reached the age when he should be seen in public more often. "So he will need supervision," the man said. Annie wondered if she got there, she might be able to find a way to keep the two of them from getting close. And then perhaps trouble will pass this family by. And she will complete the mission and return safely to her home world. Seeing only advantages for herself, Brianna asked not to worry, promising to take care of the young master. She will definitely try. She will be able to direct the course of fate in the best direction for them. 3 days later, that fateful day arrived, and Annie thought anxiously, it will soon begin. And she had absolutely no idea how to prevent the meeting between the princess and the Duke. She was so worried that she didn't even get enough rest, so she woke up in the morning with a throbbing head. Trying to avoid panic, Annie hoped that a walk in the fresh air would improve the situation. But then, as she was about to return to the estate, Brianna suddenly bumped into someone. "Oh," the girl said awkwardly, asking for forgiveness. She wasn't looking at the road But then, looking up, she realized who she had accidentally bumped into. "His Grace," she asked awkwardly. Gerald asked if she always walked without looking around. The governess apologized and asked what time he would be back. Due to preparations for the festival, Gerald leaves early in the morning and arrives only after dark. He has been doing this for a long time, and now he is curious why he dropped by so soon. He asked her to meet Madame Lydia. She would become her etiquette teacher for the next couple of days. Madame Lydia greeted Madame Brianna, and Annie asked in surprise what. Damaris and Addis conveyed to him her concerns about the upcoming carnival. "My God, it was so embarrassing," he told Dad. She was afraid of the holiday dinner, mistaking her inability to use cutlery. Brianna was devastated by the way she appeared before them. In principle, Gerald began to reassure, few people can show it naturally. "But Madame Lydia's knowledge is a huge exception," the Duke said, embarrassed. Under her supervision, her skills immediately improved. It turns out, being pleasantly surprised, Brianna thought, this is all for her sake. Back then, in the office, he also seemed indifferent, but in the end he showed care and warmth. Perhaps his heart was not as cold as he thought. Annie called out to His Grace. And smiling happily, she said, "Thank you very much." The success rate suddenly rose by 1. The day of the harvest festival had arrived, and the moment was drawing near. In the novel's narrative, Gerald and the princess first met on stage for a performance. In order to prevent a tragedy, measures will have to be taken, as she will fall in love with him right during the incident. All she had to do was take the Duke away from the stage, to her and Damaris at the market. But will it be possible to turn back the course of fate without any idea why the success scale is rising, however? When the maid suddenly announced that the carriage was already there, it was impossible to fill one's head with bad thoughts. For Damaris, herself, and Gerald, she had to give it her all. When they approached the carriage, the boy called for his daddy, but the young gentleman was met by Addis. Having not met his father, the boy became despondent because he expected something different. Why was Addis here? Brianna wondered in shock. The knight apologized, saying that the master had been unable to come and take him to the festival. Today he was supposed to give a speech on behalf of the imperial family, but asked them not to worry. Addis promised the gentleman to accompany him and Mrs. Rihanna to the carnival market. The guys had discussed everything in advance, and so it was time to put their plan into action. Damaris then suggested that Sir Addis wait until his father joined them. However, the man was forced to refuse. His master had a lot of work. Damaris sought help from the governess, and she whispered to him, "Don't be afraid, keep insisting." And so the boy tensed up to look more threatening and speak more angrily if he disobeyed this order, and the commander exclaimed that otherwise he would report him. Addis grinned at the young master's diligent appearance, and having agreed, he said, "Okay then," although he was not sure whether he would agree to such a proposal. This is how they arrived in the city and behind the scenes of the main stage. The governess praised her student for his efforts. They had done an excellent job with the first step. 2 days ago, she asked Damaris if it would be nice if the gentleman went for a walk with him and asked him to play along with her. If there was ever a thing in the world that could make a person drop everything, or even refuse to watch a performance, it would be blood relatives. So they agreed on everything and went to see what the Duke was doing. Addis hoped that he would not be angry. There was a burst of applause, and the Duke of Stuart himself came onto the stage, greeting everyone. They climbed out to spy on the man on stage, and Brianna thought the performance was already underway. The locusts that were advancing from the north of the state have been completely exterminated, and the foundations of new houses have already been laid. And citizens who have lost their homes will be provided with the necessary assistance, the Duke reported. Brianna had never seen him so serious. Surprisingly, the topic mainly raised here was the well-being of the residents and their problems. "It amazes me I don't find anything," I suddenly asked the governess Addis. The man said proudly, "Sir, the kindest man from an aristocratic family." "No one cares about the people as much as he does," the knight said admiringly about his master. While they watched the Duke with admiration, he continued his speech to the people. But Gerald felt a pleading gaze on his back, and so his gaze suddenly reached the wings. The man met the gaze of the girl who was looking at him with such admiration. Realizing she had been noticed, Brianna, in a panic as if caught in the act of something indecent, pulled the curtains. Caught peeping, what a shame, the girl thought. Blushing, Addis called out to Mistress Brianna. He announced that the speech was coming to an end and suggested that we slowly head towards the relaxation room. Damaris, seeing that the girl was standing, asked the teacher, "The three of us are going, of course," she answered with concern and ran after him. But 10 minutes later, the room was still plunged into silence, and Brianna's cheeks were burning with shame. The boy whispered to the knight. Her cheeks were very red, and for quite a long time, Addis noticed. But then the interior curtains finally opened, and Mr. Stuart entered the room along with the sunlight. "And here comes stage number 2, Brianna thought eagerly. Addis approached his lordship. As they rose from their seats, Addis told the gentleman something that made him frown at Brianna. It became interesting to see if he would be disappointed in them after such a statement and distraction from an important matter. Gerald asked if Addis was lying and that his son had indeed demanded something so unreasonable. "Yes," Damaris answered guiltily, clinging to the girl as if she were the one who could protect him. "It's just that," he explained sadly to his dad, he had never been to a holiday before. "So I decided to ask to have some fun together," in response to which Gerald bit his lip in thought. Brianna looked at the Duke with hope. He whispered something to Addis, and he accepted the master's order. They regarded this as a failure and thought that he probably intended to attend the performance anyway. But then Gerald said, "Then go to Korea. The performance cannot be missed. He will take his place there and at subsequent events." Hearing such an order, Brianna asked His Grace in surprise if he had changed his plans. "That's right," the caring father answered and asked Damaris, "We'd better take a walk to the stalls, yes." But suddenly he looked at the governess. His success scale suddenly increased by 2 units, and then he asked the girl if she would like to go with them for company. The Harvest Festival, in the novel The Place with the Stalls, was described in vivid detail. It was even better here than it seemed. "It's very busy outside," Brianna exclaimed, and Damaris was drawn to a toy stall. "He asked the Pope if they could come and take a closer look, of course," the Duke replied. Watching the student, Brianna said she had never seen Damaris so excited. Gerald asked if she had taught him to speak like that, and Annie felt awkward. Addis told him everything, the Duke said, and asked if she would explain. Gerald already found out about everything, the girl thought, and answered yes. She said that there was no other way to drag him out for a walk. The boy understands that he is busy, so he doesn't ask for anything, but even so, Brianna was sure that he was probably still a child. "So if he doesn't agree, no." Gerald interrupted her and said, "You did the right thing." "Your Grace?" she asked sheepishly, thinking that he had truly taken her action well. When suddenly Damaris interrupted them, calling for Daddy and Mistress Brianna, the man cleared his throat. And Brianna ran up to the boy and asked what was wrong. He said that the gentleman wanted to give him a gift. Following her gaze in the direction he indicated, she was surprised that Ethan and Sophia were also there. Coming closer to the group of people, the Duke asked what they needed, and Sophia turned to His Highness. But Jerome himself remembered Ethan's face and asked if he was the owner of the bookstore. Ethan confirmed that he was. For some reason, the atmosphere began to deteriorate, and it seemed as if they were sworn enemies. Gerald asked what business they had with his son. Brianna spent too long fantasizing, distracted from the conversation. Sophia sweetly informed him that Mr. Ethan would like to please the young gentleman with a present. The Duke looked at the toys behind them, and then at their happy faces. Not sensing any unfriendly atmosphere from them, Gerald asked his son if he liked them. Damaris exclaimed, very embarrassed. "Please wrap them up," Duke Gerald asked, surprising everyone with his decision. Wait, Brianna thought. How does the success scale keep going up? Where is the logic in this system? If he wasn't mistaken, the toys on the table were for charity, yes, Sophia replied. Each one was handmade by orphans from shelters. The profits from them will later be donated to orphanages. The Duke asked that part be left for the children, and the rest sent to the ducal mansion. One honorable man will pay the full price, he said, and she thought he decided to buy everything to help disadvantaged children. Ethan said that he would bring everything tomorrow morning. Sophia thanked him. She was sure that the kids would be incredibly happy. Taking a few toys with him, the Duke suggested they go, and so having said goodbye, they went on. During the walk, everything was very fun. The boy played with his dad, enjoying his new toys. Having bought some cotton candy, the girl offered the boy to try it. He happily agreed, but his hands were busy with toys. His lordship asked his son if he wanted Mistress Brianna to feed him, and she was surprised. The Duke reminded her that she herself had called Damaris effeminate. But then the boy couldn't stand it any longer. He wanted to try the unusual sweetness as soon as possible. Brianna couldn't help but feed the boy, thinking that the gentleman must have done this on purpose. It was already evening, and as I strolled past the shopping streets, I remembered my trips to the farmers' markets in my home world. They arose by themselves, warming the soul, when the boy asked to give him some more cotton wool. And she stretched it out, but didn't notice that the Duke had already lowered his son to the ground. Brianna apologized excitedly. She hadn't been paying attention to where she was placing the cotton wool. She wondered with concern why she had suddenly handed it to Gerald. While she was lost in her thoughts, right under the launching of fireworks, the Duke bit off a piece of sweetness. Brianna's cheeks turned pink. Damaris said, "Beautiful fireworks," and Gerald thought, "Very sweet." Why would he suddenly do something so confusing? Annie wondered, however, with fireworks currently thundering in the sky. It turns out that the meeting with the princess was successfully prevented. Success. "Sir," said Brianna, "it's time for the young master to take a nap," and suggested that they slowly return. Suddenly the coachman shouted, "Get out of the way! There are no coachman's horses." The girl almost froze in fear of danger, but Gerald pulled her and her son off the road in time. When everything calmed down, he asked if everything was okay. "Yes," Brianna answered, and asked Damaris. "He was okay too, thank God. We weren't hurt," the girl said with relief. "Who's that guy who likes to drive recklessly in the middle of the alley? Have they completely lost their minds?" Brianna asked indignantly. But the answer was not long in coming. A girl came out of the carriage. And this turned out to be Princess Anne, from whom Brianna had been trying to protect the Duke all day. Looking at the woman with irritation, the Duke's gauge suddenly dropped sharply from 16 to 10. Damn it, the girl thought in despair. Crossing paths with her would not bode well. The success rate dropped by a full 6% because of Princess Anne. She was so lost in thought that she completely forgot about the lesson when Damaris called out to her. He asked Miss Brianna what was wrong. She answered evasively. The girl looked worried since the morning, and Damaris was very worried about her. Hearing the concern in the boy's voice, the girl turned to him in surprise. Smiling awkwardly, she apologized to Damaris, but some thoughts wouldn't leave her. Very unpleasant. It was 3 days ago, when Anna almost ran into them, she approached Duke Stewart. She asked to accept her apologies for the inconvenience caused. The Duke said that a lady of her flight should not walk around in such places in plain sight. Exactly, the girl agreed. She was planning to hold a luxurious banquet and would like him to honor the guests with his presence. She will send a man, but he interrupted and said that there is no need to bother. He has too much work. He will not be able to attend the holiday. "It is a pity," replied the princess, "for her father would have been very glad to see him." His Grace the Duke did not like this manipulation, especially since the girl had just almost run over his son. But since such was His Majesty's wish, he did not dare refuse. "Excellent," Anna rejoiced. After Anna's appearance, the scale dropped to 10%, but now something else was bothering him. She had taken Gerald away from the fateful event. But in the end, it still didn't prevent their meeting, and if nothing is done at the moment, then, according to the original plot, the baby will definitely be killed. Suddenly, a small child's hand touched Brianna's head. His eyes widened in surprise, and Damaris asked, Perhaps he was thinking about something unpleasant. The boy asked the teacher not to be sad. He was there and would definitely support her. This support really touched the girl. "Thank you so much, my sweet little angel," Annie thought. She wouldn't let anyone hurt him. In the novel, he lost control of his magic during a party thrown by the princess. Therefore, by teaching him to control it, trouble will probably pass him by. But only one person can help in this matter, the main character of the novel, Ethan. And so, at the first opportunity, she left Damaris and came to the city to the bookstore. Standing in front of him, the girl wondered whether she should just go in. The story seems to describe him as a kind person who helped many simple peasant children who possessed magic. However, Damaris is from the upper classes, which means he is guaranteed to attract extra attention from prying eyes. It's unlikely that even a man as honest as Ethan would expose himself to such a risk. The boy told his mother that the girl was running back and forth, and the woman, thinking she was crazy, quickly took her son away. "Pull yourself together," Brianna told herself sheepishly. "Don't be shy, Annie," she told herself more confidently, and entered the bookstore. "Hello," Brianna said awkwardly, but the shop was surprisingly empty. Suddenly, Sophia appeared from the shelves and apologized, as she was alone in the shop today and was therefore a little late. "Everything is fine," she hastened to reassure the girl. "She has arrived." "Because of the Duke's son, probably?" Sophia asked the girl sagely, interrupting her slightly. She could help solve this problem. Sophia asked her not to be nervous. She already knew that the boy possessed magic when he barely managed to cross the threshold of the shop. Besides, adults rarely lose control of magic. In addition, given the young gentleman's poor health, it wasn't difficult to guess. So, Annie thought, Sophia also knew about witchcraft, but nothing like that was mentioned in the novel. And it wasn't she who discovered the mana emission, but some mysterious figure. She sighed heavily and decided it was time to teach Damaris how to cast spells. "Yes, that's right," she exclaimed, and Sophia asked what exactly she needed help with. Annie begged him and Master Ethan, the Twilight Guide, to become his mentors and teach him how to control the surge of energy. "So it turns out," Sophia sighed, "she already knows his real activities. She'd asked him 1,000,000 times not to wear that stupid coat." As expected, Annie thought, mentioning the protagonist's nickname. It would relieve her of unnecessary suspicions, but she continued awkwardly. She wasn't sure whether he would agree to help them out. Nobody wants to get involved with the Stewart family. But Sophia said they always tried to take care of children with such problems, and of course they wouldn't leave the Duke's son in trouble. "Excellent," she exclaimed joyfully. However, she continued, upset, thinking she hadn't even warned Gerald about her decision. Sophia asked curiously if she had discussed this matter with his lordship. "Don't panic," the girl said immediately. "She should talk to Ethan first. When she settles everything, they will come to visit them together. Okay?" Brianna replied after thinking, not a lady, but a real angel. After a walk in the city, the girl returned to the mansion and knocked on the office door. "Come in," said the Duke. "Good afternoon," Brianna said to his lordship. "Come on, Brianna," she encouraged herself. "There's no point in giving up now." "I was walking recently, yes," the Duke asked the governess. She was stunned and asked where he found out about it. Damaris lost her, and even showed up at his office to conduct inspections, the man explained. "I was simply trying to find a new teacher for the young gentleman," the girl answered, stuttering. Gerald looked at his worker in surprise. For what reason, he asked, was she able to cope with her duties quite well? Brianna quickly replied that she meant the sorcerer's teacher, but after saying this, she immediately froze. "Nightmare?" she asked in fear, wondering why those words had suddenly come out of her mouth. The pen in the Duke's hand broke, and the scale above his head began to waver with anger. "What?" he asked irritably, a creepy look, she thought fearfully, stepping back. And yet, stubbornly continuing, she asked if he remembered the incident in the bookstore. When it happened, by a twist of fate, the local owners saved them from discovery. Thanks to their earnings, they managed to escape in time. He probably wouldn't believe her words now. But Sir Ethan is also a magician, and he can teach the kid to control magic. Then the problems will finally end. Without letting her finish, the Duke shouted angrily, asking how she even knew about his abilities. "Who else did she manage to tell?" Gerald asked, not holding back his anger. "No one else," the girl answered timidly. "What if gossip starts spreading now?" the Duke muttered devastatedly. "That won't happen," she exclaimed. She said angrily that her job was to look after the son of imperial blood, not to protect strangers. He screamed that because of her stupid willfulness she had now put the Stewart heir in danger. Brianna didn't know how to answer, she thought. There was no point in the protagonists of the world harming others. "Enough," he shouted and said more calmly. "The discussion is over. He will take care of the rest himself." But the girl did not give up trying, asking to give her the opportunity to explain. "Mistress Brianna," Gerald said coldly. She had truly disappointed him. From now on, Damaris no longer needs a governess nor a wizard mentor. Brianna was devastated by her dismissal and tried to reason with her master, but he ordered her to get out of sight, and Gerald understood that what had happened was her mistake. If only he hadn't allowed him, then their secret would have remained a secret. "Father," a child's voice screamed hysterically in his head. "Why? Why did you do this?" Damaris's voice screamed. "It's all your fault." No, Gerald thought. He wouldn't let that happen. He wouldn't let a single soul hurt his son. As soon as the percentage of the scale reached 0, Brianna screamed in pain, "Listen." She decided not to obey, the Duke wanted to ask, but he broke off mid-sentence. The girl's body began to fail, and notifications of attention and danger clouded her vision. Did he really intend to keep the boy in the mansion until the end of time? He was only 5 years old, Brianna screamed. "He must become an eagle that will soar and glorify the name of the Stuarts," she screamed, crying in pain. "But not a crippled chick languishing in a cage, but?" Gerald asked, stunned. With her last bit of strength, she advised the gentleman to think about whether this was really the right decision, whether he treats him this way or not, and having said this, she left the office. Slamming the door behind her, she exhaled heavily. Thunder rumbled outside and the first drop of rain fell. Having hobbled to the balcony, she went out into the street, her body shaking, and breathing becoming increasingly painful. The system didn't lie. As soon as the success percentage dropped to 0, the notification reported a critical value. At that moment, the punishment began. Her life would definitely come to an end. Why did everything turn out this way? She tried so hard to change everything. And in the end, she couldn't do anything. But even being thrown out of the Duke's estate is far worse than a death sentence. Having been standing in the pouring rain for some time, she only noticed that it had started to rain. It seemed as if even the heavens were taking pity on her, and the ending was already predetermined. But she continued to desperately struggle to escape, but now she will remain imprisoned here forever. Time cannot be turned back. As another clap of thunder and lightning lit up the sky, Brianna suddenly stopped. After her last words, the punishment process stopped. As a result, she did not die. It turns out the scale did not hit the bottom. Now there was still a chance to correct mistakes and direct the situation in the right direction. True, as long as she's alive. If Brianna could justify and defend her position, Gerald would definitely, when suddenly she sneezed. It was too cold outside. It was necessary to return to the room quickly. But before she ran into the back, she noticed some light in the gentleman's team. "Damaris, it's a magical surge again." He was having another burst of energy. Brianna wondered why he had suddenly lost control of his magic. But before she could get up, she met the Duke. He was still angry, she thought. The girl tried to say something to the gentleman, but he didn't even listen to her. They burst into Damaris's room and were immediately engulfed in a wave of his magic. The baby cowered in fear in the corner, unable to control the forced son, he cried. Gerald told Damaris that it was him, and as he came closer, he asked him to calm down. However, the boy did not accept help, was afraid of causing harm, and only screamed, as if telling him not to come closer. The boy's lightning bolts almost reached Gerald. Suddenly, in the midst of all this confusion, a pair of pink strands of hair flashed before his eyes. Enduring the pain, the girl tenderly hugged Damaris and asked him not to be afraid. "Hush, little angel," she said to him tenderly, promising to definitely protect him. "But what is happening? Why does the situation seem more dire compared to the past?" What to do, Brianna thought, confused and afraid, unable to calm the child. But suddenly a bright light reached her eyes and the boy's forehead. Lightning stopped bursting out of the body randomly. "Don't be afraid," the father asked his son with concern. Now it dawned on Brianna that Gerald was absorbing a surge of Damaris's magic. Following his lordship, Brianna wondered why he had suddenly changed his position. After Gerald absorbed his son's mana surge, the boy fell into a deep sleep. And then, having put the baby to bed, he told the girl to follow him. The novel never mentioned that the Duke had magic, and now I wondered why on earth he would reveal his secret. Is he really taking her somewhere to be executed without any extra witnesses? The door creaked open and the Duke told her to come in. Brianna thought with dismay that she couldn't believe there was such a creepy room in the estate. It felt like it had been abandoned for a very long time. So was she really brought here to be killed? He'll probably cut off her head with a sword, although no, he doesn't have a blade with him. Maybe he'll poison her. That's also unlikely. This method is used secretly from prying eyes or using magic, which he certainly masters to perfection. Gerald remained silent, only letting more light into the room. However, for some reason inside there was a feeling that Gerald was sad. Had the all-powerful Duke ever felt this way, Annie wondered? "This is his old room," Gerald explained, his words echoing around the empty room. "He was often locked here." Then the father told his son that he would have to sit here until he learned to control spells. Like Damaris, Gerald was born with a curse of witchcraft. The outside world would never, under any circumstances, accept the heir of the Stewart family, who was a monster. So Dad locked him up while he tried to control the magic. This closet was his little universe. This is how he talks about his childhood: no love, no toys, only the twilight kept him company. This man struggled with his own problems completely alone. She asked why he decided to tell about the past, about a secret that should have remained a secret. "That's a good question indeed," Gerald muttered. Just like during the incident at the bookstore, even though she is an ordinary teacher, this girl rushed to help Damaris, despite the possible danger. In addition, when she asked to be allowed to be a governess, saying that the boy needed care and love, the Duke believed that the words she had spoken to him then had inspired confidence in him. If he overcomes himself and agrees the first time, the situation will probably change. Gerald was the first to continue the conversation, talking about what had happened earlier. And the next moment, they both apologized at the same time. The man said what she meant and suggested that she try to find a wizard mentor for him. Brianna's eyes widened, and not just at the sudden offer. The scale above his head, the percentage suddenly began to rise and increase to 20. Besides, she thought, she hadn't misheard. Gerald had actually apologized. This shocked Brianna so much that she even stepped back. "You know," she said, "it was very tactless of her to look for a teacher on her own. She simply tried for the good of his son, and if he somehow disagreed, then..." To her surprise, the Duke said they would do as she wished, which Annie asked in shock. But this is how the meeting with the future wizard teachers took place for the young magician. Although it was unclear whether they had come for interrogation or to teach magic, the Duke's gaze was so deadly. But then the door opened and Brianna led Damaris into the others, telling him to meet his new teachers. Immediately, I caught a look on myself, pleading with Mistress Brianna for help. The girl was no longer surprised. This was such an expected outcome. Even though Gerald agreed to find a sorcerer mentor for Damaris, he agreed to work with him alone, saying that he would even personally attend the classes. In short, he took a defensive position for his son. She was afraid that then others would know about his abilities, but this option was the safest. And at first Annie thought it was a good idea, but now the atmosphere is much more tense than ever. It was necessary to somehow quickly dispel the situation, and Brianna asked if she thought it was time to begin. She asked the young gentleman. He was already in anticipation. "They can begin?" Damaris asked hesitantly, and his father nodded affirmatively. "Let's try," he said. Finally, Brianna thought, contact has been established. Damaris looked at the people and recognized them as the girl and guy from the festival. Ethan asked, "Wow, he remembers them." The boy was very happy with their gifts and thanked them again, promising to try harder. "Anyway," Ethan said, inviting the young gentleman to begin the lesson. But then the Duke interrupted him mid-sentence, and the man froze, worried that the gentleman might not like it. "Sir," the magician addressed his lordship, and then Gerald said that he forgot to warn him. "Sir Ethan," said the Duke, rolling up his sleeves, "he will be his apprentice from now on." Thus began the witchcraft classes, Miss Sophia showing Damaris the possibilities of magic. What could be done with the help of force amazed the boy very much, and he did not hide his delight. "It looks like a trick, I agree," the girl asked the young student in a friendly manner. "It's incredible," the boy exclaimed. The duchy's governess was very pleased that they got along so quickly. But what can I say about those two? They still need to learn friendliness. There was tension between them. It was good that they at least discussed the details of the study, and that was at least some progress. Finally, Ethan got down to business and said he would now show you how to control energy. He asked the Duke to repeat after him and created the same sphere that Sophia showed. This was the first step. While the magician was distracted, the Duke quietly spied on what his son was doing and what his progress was. However, Ethan noticed that the man was dodging the task and irritably asked him to watch carefully. "Oops," the Duke said disinterestedly, but then Brianna ran up to them and exclaimed, "This is simply amazing." He realized that there was something to surprise her with, and that he was no worse than this ownerless magician, and therefore he studied more closely what he was doing with her. And the next moment, as if an experienced sorcerer had conjured up a sphere that even surpassed Ethan's magic. "Oh, wow," the governess said with enthusiasm and passion. "His grace is not inferior." Ethan continued, trying to show that this was not the limit, not expecting the Duke to be able to show off in such a possession. "Let's see," the great magician thought with excitement, "how he can surpass this." But to his regret, the man was able not only to repeat, but to recreate something more interesting and exciting. "You're laughing," Ethan thought irritably. "It's amazing," Sophia exclaimed. "You catch on so quickly. He really did it on the first try, and my son also said that his dad is great." Then Ethan put aside his prejudices and stopped this ridiculous rivalry. The Duke really wasn't up to the level of a newbie. He thought about it carefully. Besides, if the Duke had been taught by some magician, gossip would definitely have started spreading. But they never existed, which means, apparently, he had something similar from above long ago. When it was time to leave, Sophia praised the boy, saying that he had done a great job today. The kid asked hopefully they would come back here again. "Of course," the teacher answered, and on that note, they all said goodbye until they met again soon. Success, Annie thought happily. After seeing the guests off, they went back to the estate, and a new, trusting relationship was formed between father and son. The scale had risen back to 20%, meaning it was moving in the right direction. The princess wrote a letter to Duke Stuart. She once again wanted to express her gratitude for his help at the Harvest Festival. She cordially invited him and his son to attend a sumptuous banquet in 3 days, and signed with love, Anna Walbert. The three of them waited impatiently for the boy to create the magic sphere. And just as he was getting the hang of it, Brianna exclaimed, "Well done, Damaris." "Excellent," the girls praised him. "Look, Mistress Brianna," he said, "he did it, it worked." "Yes, young master," she answered. However, it is a pity that his father was not here now and did not see that he succeeded. "Everything is fine," the teacher said. She was sure that when his lordship returned, he would definitely praise her and be proud. "Of course," said Sophia, and suggested that they practice a little more so that he could personally demonstrate his abilities. The kid happily agreed. By the way, today Gerald missed his son's class for the first time. What was so important that had come up, she thought. There was a knock at the door, and Addis entered the room, asking for forgiveness from the gentleman. Everyone greeted the knight joyfully. "What happened?" asked the governess. The man told Miss that the master had ordered him and the young master to be escorted somewhere. "Right now," the girl asked and thought warily, "I wonder what all the rush was about." She apologized for having to interrupt the lesson early. "No problem," Sophia replied. "Don't keep the Duke waiting." With these words, Brianna left with Damaris. It seemed as if Sophia had some kind of bad feeling. Following Addis, Brianna wondered why he had suddenly called because of Damaris's lessons. Although no, it's unlikely. Otherwise, he would have definitely chosen a different time, which means they had a guest coming to visit. The knight introduced the people he had brought to the night, as they had asked, and she greeted him. But the man said irritably and coldly, "They are forcing His Excellency to languish in solitude for too long." She is being ignored, the governess thought, taken aback. The knight asked them to enter, but as soon as Addis and Damaris passed, he blocked her path. He explained angrily, "The gentleman only wants to see the young gentleman." What an angry look, she thought. Well, since he personally asked so, emphasizing the word, the knight said, he apologized. He will now take her back. "It's okay," Brianna said, wondering what had come here. The baby called out to Miss Brianna with concern. "Don't worry," the girl reassured the student, telling him to go with Addis and not to be afraid of anything. Entertaining said that he would keep watch outside, so Damaris agreed. "Rude commoners," the unpleasant man muttered towards Brianna. Because he turned away, the girl's gaze fell on the belt with the blade shining on it. And immediately, everything became clear on the blade. There was a coat of arms in the form of a shield with a crown. After all, this was a symbol of the imperial court from the novel, allowing one to freely visit Gerald's estate and arrange a personal meeting with him. Even Addis does not dare to disobey their guard, which means luxurious bright red hair. Brianna wondered what kind of aristocratic family member had such power. Isn't this a bit of an unexpected visit? According to the book's plot, Anna is the main culprit in Damaris's death. She persistently invited Gerald to the banquet, even sending her man to the estate to deliver the invitation. She did all this so as not to leave the Duke with a choice, and if he showed up there with his son, then the baby's secret would be revealed. Although the angel has improved his skills, maybe if he practices a little more before the celebration then. Careful! Sophia suddenly screamed, and Brianna realized she had almost crashed. Everything is fine, Sophia asked with concern. Asking what she was doing, Annie was surprised by this meeting. Sophia saw her wandering up and down the stairs, so she decided to go up and check on her. She asked if she wasn't on her way to see the Duke, so why was she standing in the corridor? Brianna said that it seemed he was currently having an audience with a guest from the imperial court, and she was considered unnecessary. After all, the meeting was between nobles, Sophia asked. Is their relationship with the Duke unofficial? I mean, Brianna asked, taken aback, and the sorceress asked, aren't they lovers? Being them, it's normal to go everywhere together, so why did they send her away? She asked. Oh my God, Annie exclaimed. They are not a couple at all. But in the end, the ideas about practicing magic with them and buying each toy were hers. In addition, His Grace himself consulted with her and the young master. With an embarrassed sigh, Brianna said that she was simply Damaris's governess. But then Sophia asked, but besides, he doesn't treat other teachers in a special way, right? Brianna gasped in shock, and the sorceress said, always unapproachable, domineering, but with her he is gentle. Now that I think about it, what was happening really did look like this. No, Sophia's girlfriend exclaimed embarrassedly. She's exaggerating too much. Seriously? Sophia asked with a smile and muttered. She was terribly jealous. Standing at the front entrance of the Duke's estate, Addis said it was time to leave, but Gerald said they would wait a little longer. He looked at the young gentleman with confusion, and the little one said that Miss Brianna should join soon. Otherwise, Damaris would be unattended at the celebration, the Duke explained, but she was not on the guest list, the knight said. The man spoke coldly. He hoped, on behalf of the head of the family, he would take care of this little thing. Got it, answered Addis. Finally, the attention-grabbing sound of heels was heard. Brianna literally ran out of the estate and apologized for being late. Wow, the young gentleman exclaimed in admiration. The teacher is irresistible today. True, the girl asked shyly. Yes, the knight answered. She looks great. The Duke said nothing about her appearance, hiding his embarrassment. He called everyone into the carriage. 2 carriages headed to the palace for the banquet, but Brianna couldn't find a seat. Why wasn't she warned that she would have to go with Gerald? Your Grace, she said awkwardly, looking up from her book. Gerald was listening to her. Brianna asked if she shouldn't have gotten into the carriage with the young master before she could finish. The Duke replied, he just wanted to discuss a couple of things with her. Okay? She replied, trembling. Although he had learned to control magic, he had never attended such events. Of course, the girl answered. She would try to follow him and ask the gentleman to continue. But then the Duke asked her to relax. To make his request come true, he said that he was nearby. People usually didn't risk getting involved with the Stewart family, so he advised them to stay close. I suddenly remembered Sophia's words about how his attitude towards her was very special, and this only threw me off balance even more. Why say misleading words? Then she exclaimed briskly, asking Gerald not to worry. She promised to praise his family. The next moment, a cry of pain was heard outside the walls of the carriage. It was painful. However, after hitting her on the head, either because of the words he said to her, Gerald smiled. Oh, Brianna thought, stunned, he's smiling, and the success rate has gone up. So they arrived at a banquet teeming with aristocracy. It felt uneasy at first, but when Brianna looked around, she thought, damn, it's like a scene from a movie. While the girl was in the clouds, the Duke greeted the Marquise of Zenobia, and the man greeted him just as joyfully. And then he turned his attention to his son next to him and said that they were just like 2 peas in a pod. It was becoming hectic. It was a great honor for them to see my lord at the celebration. His appearance immediately set a different mood. The Marquis asked if he would like to attend a banquet at his mansion next week. What should she do, she thought in confusion. In all this bustling crowd, I wanted to find some secluded place. Finally, she managed to break free from the crowd and breathe a sigh of relief. Damaris quickly adapted to the local environment. She will pick him up a little later. Before she could exhale, noble ladies approached her and greeted her. Pardon me? She asked. The girl asked with interest, will you be the lady of the Stewart estate? No, she answered awkwardly. No doubt, her friend suddenly exclaimed. After all, she had gotten out of the same carriage with him. The girls enthusiastically praised her dress and her skin, which was like flawless silk. They didn't even notice that the gentleman was bringing the young lady after the recent incident. In the confusion, the girl asked what her relationship was with the Duke, and Brianna answered honestly. Upon learning that she was the governess of the Stewart residence, the talk instantly stopped. Even the silence became oppressive. They assumed she had worked hard to get this position and was asking them to enjoy their time as they said goodbye. She knew that they would run away after hearing the truth. The only thing was that she could at least keep an eye on the little angel. How loudly the arrival of His Imperial Highness Princess Anne Walbert was announced. Ha! And here is a woman who destroyed other people's lives for her own gain. Brianna peered around, trying to figure out who was walking arm in arm with her. But then this man was announced, His Imperial Highness, Prince Corden. Incredible, she thought, stunned. The same guy who gave Gerald the letter. Apparently, he's in a close relationship with that bitch. In the novel, he is described as cruel and heartless, like his father, and if Anna has already won the trust of such a man. Out of the way, the princess commanded coldly, passing Brianna. She went straight to Duke Stewart and greeted him at her elegant banquet. Her Highness asked him to enjoy it. It was his favorite red wine, Felixson. The Duke thanked the girl. The governess couldn't even believe that they were chatting so calmly, although the princess didn't seem as cruel as she was described in the novel. While the adults were talking, the baby started looking at the treats. Noticing this interest, Gerald asked his son if he wanted to try. The boy nodded enthusiastically. Wait, Brianna suddenly became wary as she watched them, noticing how the princess's gaze changed to irritation. With disdain for the child, she made eyes at the Duke and offered him a drink to him. So her politeness was feigned. Brianna got angry. What was she up to? Meanwhile, Princess Anand tilted her glass to casually spill wine on Damaris. When confronted by the princess, Brianna got ahead of her plan by shouting, "Stop!" Brianna, the Duke asked the girl in surprise. The governess fenced off her student. The princess's maid screamed, asking who she was and how dare she approach Her Highness so unceremoniously. Having scolded the girl, Her Highness ordered her not to frighten them. Having regrouped, she said tenderly, "She and the young master must have been seriously scared." "Everything is fine," Brianna answered. Well, Annie thought she hadn't planned to spill wine on him. The princess had asked to be allowed to ask who she was. Brianna felt ashamed of herself, wondering where she had even come up with that idea, and so, at a loss, she couldn't really answer. The Duke answered for her, saying Miss Brianna Jones, Damaris's teacher, probably pushed Her Highness away because she is worried about the student. She apologized for her clumsiness. "Everything is fine," the princess replied, and the maid shouted, "This is unacceptable insolence," offering to call the guards. "It seems that Miss Jones is attending such an event for the first time," asked the princess. "Her excitement is easy to understand, isn't it?" To be honest, she didn't expect the Duke to bring a tutor with him. Was he really worried that there would be no one to look after the young Duke at the banquet? She had plenty of trained and experienced servants, Gerald interrupted, saying, "No need to bother yourself." "That's how it is," the princess replied. "Something's wrong," Brianna thought uneasily. "It still feels strange, just like with the wine." She almost spilled it on Damaris, as if the princess was constantly trying to get rid of him. She noticed the strong bonds of trust between Miss Brianna and Duke Stewart, and Annie felt a chill. But then the maid informed the princess that it was almost time for the speech, and Her Highness was forced to leave. She told everyone about it, Duke Stewart, the young Duke, and Miss Jones. Finally she was gone, Brianna thought with a sigh of relief. Suddenly, Miss Brianna was pulled away by the little boy and asked if he had done anything wrong. The girl asked him why he thought that, and Damaris said that it seemed Her Highness was not delighted with him. Even Damaris noticed. She was surprised and said, "Well, of course not. Today he showed himself from a wonderful side." "His lordship thinks so too," Brianna said, and asked the Duke what he thought. "He did a good job," Gerald replied happily. And now the chance of success increased again. Now it reached 22%. But then his lordship, embarrassed, said that she should tidy up her dress. And indeed, the wine from the glass ended up spilling on her. The girl, embarrassed, asked for forgiveness, saying that she would return quickly. Damaris noticed the awkwardness between them. However, no matter how long Brianna stood in the bathroom, she didn't think she could get the stains out. She had been too reckless to rush headlong straight at the princess, she admitted. They could have killed her. Knowing Anna, she would definitely hold a grudge against her. Suddenly she heard voices, and among them the name of Damaris sounded, the most tense of all. These were the princess's maids. They had just been talking about some preparations, and Damaris. This meant that it was imperative to find out what was going on. Following them, Brianna was convinced that she was right. These were the princess's maids. "Are they finished yet?" she asked them boredly. The girl said that everything was organized. Layla was already getting ready. It was all because of some brat, how it infuriated Anna. The maid reported that everything would go like clockwork when His Majesty approved their engagement to Duke Stuart. Any obstacles between her and the Duke must be removed. No one should stand between them. She was definitely serious about targeting Damaris. "Oh shit," Brianna thought fearfully. "I think she's coming this way." When suddenly the maid announced that Layla should be ready by now, the princess told her to go and see how everything was going. As soon as the door slammed, Brianna breathed a sigh of relief. She already thought she was caught. She couldn't wait for the banquet to end. She needed to get Damaris out of here as quickly as possible. Oh, suddenly a long and nasty voice was heard behind me. Anna thought rats had gotten inside, but it was just her, Miss Jones. She said in a frightened voice that she didn't expect to see her here, thinking, "Oh shit, Anna won't leave a single wet spot of her." "Well," Julia replied Brianna, "she must be somewhere." "Ah," the princess asked menacingly. It didn't occur to her how stupidly naive it was. Does she seriously think that she will let her go just like that after hearing what she said? She already knows that she was eavesdropping. What a terrible look. It will definitely finish her off. What should she do? She can't die here. Damaris would be in great danger. If she did not tell Gerald what she had heard, she did not understand what the Duke saw in her. It was worth the risk, and Brianna told His Highness that she was sure she knew that, and the personal tutor at the Duke's estate. And, the princess asked irritably. The Duke ordered her to check the weather from the balcony. The young gentleman was forbidden to play in the garden in the cold. She hasn't returned for some time, and the Duke must send someone for her soon. Anna asked with contempt, what if something happened to her on the balcony? She was sure that the Duke would suspect something was wrong if something happened to her in her presence. "Oh," she exclaimed, Anna. In the novel, Anna did everything possible to win Gerald. She would not dare tarnish her reputation with a risky adventure. This is her weakness, and therefore her chance of survival. Everything will work out, she hoped, and then the princess grinned. "It seems there was just a misunderstanding, Miss Jones." "Yes," Brianna thought happily. "It worked." In that case, Brianna asked to be forgiven. She hurried to take her leave so that she could quickly report to Gerald what she had heard. But Anna followed her and said, "Go ahead, don't keep the Duke waiting, if you can find him at all." And indeed, running around the hall, she could not find him. Anna noticed that she did not return to Gerald. She might try to do something else. But then the princess's maid collided with her, causing Brianna to stagger and almost fall. The girl, without even apologizing, disappeared into the crowd of aristocrats. Forgotten, she was just in a hurry. Now it was more important to find the Duke and leave this place. How strange! Where did they both go? Just then, the door to the banquet hall opened with a bang, and the girl was taken aback by what was happening. The prince and princess, accompanied by knights, returned to the hall. Anna asked the gentlemen not to worry, she just needed their help. She reported that the necklace given to her by Prince Carden was missing, and she hoped they could help find it, as it was very important to her. The ladies nearby immediately guessed what necklace they were talking about. They had heard that the prince had given it as a gift for his coming-of-age ceremony. She had a bad feeling about how Anna had managed to lose such a valuable necklace on that particular day. Suddenly a chill ran down her skin. Wait, could it really be that her fears turned out to be true? Planted it on her. The knight asked the miss not to move. She trembled and agreed, thinking it was too late. And the next moment he took the necklace out of his pocket, shouting to Her Highness that he had found her necklace with her. So that's what it was. People had already started whispering. But then Brianna said that she had not touched the necklace. It had been planted by a maid who had bumped into her. There must have been a misunderstanding. She doesn't seem like the type to steal, does she? All the people invited here are nobles. Why would there be a thief among them? Excellent, she rejoiced. People believe her. However, a peasant woman like her could succumb to greed and steal such a valuable piece of jewelry. Peasant? The girl asked, what she was doing here anyway. She was a servant at the Duke of Stuart's estate, who had ended up here simply by sitting on his neck. In an instant, their attitude towards the girl changed simply because she did not belong to the nobility. "What a pitiful truth, Miss Jones," said the princess. "It's all yours," she hissed angrily. But Her Highness interrupted her mid-sentence and ordered her to stop making excuses. She couldn't believe that she had committed such a shameless crime, even though she worked at the Duke's estate. She didn't see a single sign of remorse in her. She felt so sorry for the Duke. The prince ordered the guards to detain and execute the thief the next day. What the hell, she thought. Execution? She didn't do it. Let me explain, Annie pleaded. The loud steps of heavy boots hit the tiles of the hall, and the next moment a cold voice made everyone freeze. Since they knew she was from the ducal estate, the footsteps quickly caught up with Brianna. "What's the point of this performance?" Gerald asked furiously, the notification sound informing him that the success bar had dropped by 3 units.